Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. A little technical difficulties, but I think we're ready to get started. We'll start with Antonia.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you all. My name's Antonia Seymour. I'm delighted to be here on the panel with you all. As you can tell, I'm from the UK, and I'm the CEO of IOP Publishing, who are a global learned society publisher, publishing in the physical sciences. So we're part of the Institute of Physics. And we're each going to give you a little bit of an intro into ourselves and what our organizations stand for, and then we'll have time for questions and discussion. So from my perspective, the thing that I think is really important to focus on is, oh, thank you, you've changed my slides, is the choice that researchers have in today's world. There are so many different outlets for researchers to publish in. There are the well-established journals, but there are hundreds and hundreds of new journals being launched every year. There are the open platforms, and there are the preprint servers. And then when you roll into that as well, the different funder mandates that exist now, it becomes quite a challenge for researchers to make decisions about where to publish. So as a society publisher, our job is to work closely with our researcher communities and support them through that publishing choice and through that research life cycle. And one of the things that has changed significantly with the move to an open access business model, if you like, is the focus on the author experience. And we don't really hear that much about that. There's a lot of discussions around the bad behaviors that open access is driving, but actually one of the really good behaviors that it's driving is publishers taking the time to make sure that that author experience is really exceptional, because we want them to come back. We want them to publish again with us. And so we're making quite significant investments into that author experience at IOP Publishing. Some of you may know that we're working with Maurice, a technology company, to completely reinvent the peer review and submission system to be fit for purpose in the future in this new paradigm. We're thinking about innovative ways that we can improve peer review. There are some good things and bad things about peer review. It's not scalable very easily at the moment. So what can we do as a learned society publisher to innovate around that process? And the other point I just want to make is back to that sort of purpose aspect, which we're all here to talk about today, is the fact that 100% of our proceeds go back into science. So all the money we make on the publishing side of the Institute of Physics funds the work that they do. And I think that's an increasingly important distinction as we move forward, where many of the people that we work with don't just have a job in science because it's a job. They really care about science, and they really care about moving forward discoveries. And many of the people that work at IOPP really appreciate that purpose aspect of what we do. And I think open access is just one part, one big beginning of a much longer reform that we're going to see in the way that research is done. So there's going to be more emphasis on different behaviors and different achievements beyond just publishing your article in a high impact factor journal. And I think that that culture shift plays to the advantage of purpose-led publishers like IOPP. So that's why IOPP, together with the American Physical Society, and their acronym is APS, which is the same as Stacey's, which is the American Physiological Society. So we have to be clear that we're not collaborating. We might, but today. Our communities are a bit different. But the American Physical Society and the American Institute of Physics Publishing, we've come together and formed a coalition that we call the Purpose-Led Publishing Coalition. We serve the same audiences. We are addressing the same challenges. What can we do together to really improve that researcher service in the future? So I just wanted to play you this video. I was going to say this damn video because it's been the bane of my life, but I think we have it working now. So I've talked to you about that, but here we go. So I think it's quite a powerful message. And, you know, in summary, good publishing takes time. Good publishing costs money. And it's not just about getting the research out there, it's about making sure that it's quality, making sure that the peer review process has been quality, making sure that we're protecting against fraudsters and making sure that the research integrity is there, making sure that articles reach the widest possible audience. So all of that does cost money, and if you're going to spend money as a university librarian or as an author, wouldn't you want to know that that money is going back into science rather than into shareholders' pockets? So that's a force for good in my book, and as I say, I think that higher order benefit's going to make us an even more attractive partner to researchers and librarians in the future. So I'll stop there and hand over to my colleague Maurice, who's going to talk about the librarian perspective.
Oh, great. Yeah. Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Oh, you have the clicker here.
Oh, wonderful.
Green means go.
Green means go?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. There we go. So I'm Maurice York. I'm the Director of Library Initiatives for the Big Ten Academic Alliance. And we have been investing in our open access and publishing portfolio for probably about 4 years. We're pretty new to the space. But what is wonderful about that is there are so many excellent organizations and really brilliant people working in the space, and we get to learn from everything that has been accomplished, and particularly as we see it over the last 20 years. So I want to talk a little bit just about where we are and what things kind of look like for us and the approach that we're taking. Because we're very much, I think one of the other things that we take as a real strength is we're putting values and principles at the center of everything that we do. So our North Star for the libraries and our, so just to say that the origin of the Big Ten Academic Alliance libraries, and particularly as of about 20 years ago, we've been around since like 58. So we've been around a long time. For the last 20 years or so, we're tuned towards being like many U.S. consortia buying clubs, right? We get together, we get better terms, we get better prices by joining together. That's a very powerful thing. It's positioned us to be able to look and take the next step. So the importance of establishing this as our North Star is that our previous mandated purpose was to save money. Establishing this new North Star, and our deans told us it is, I like to read this every time it comes out, right? In order to advance a just, trustworthy, scalable, and sustainable open knowledge ecosystem, make open, more equitable scholarship our lead purpose. And that means through everything we do, through every service that we run, every program, every contract that we make. So really, as we're looking into the open publishing space, we say, how does this manifest and how do we work it through everything that we do? So this is really the nature of this pivot, is that we say to ourselves, we are pretty good at measuring cost and business process. We've been doing that for a long time, right? We've actually become a pretty well-tuned engine for reporting out on that question we get asked at the end of every year, which fundamentally comes down to how much money did you save us, right? So what we're not as good at is measuring values and principles and how we progress on those. So that's what we're really, as we make this pivot in our approach in our portfolio, that's really where we're trying to build out how might we do that. Our lead values and principles, and we've had to get very specific about this, because if we said, well, what we could do in cost and business process is, bring in metrics, report on that, things like that. We should be able to do the same in the values space. It's not a feeling, it's not a sense, right? These are actual metrics and things that we can measure. And we know by measuring those when we're succeeding and moving in the right direction and when it's not working out how we thought we would, and we need to adjust a little bit. So these principles are, the first thing we did was establishing these core values and principles. So establishing a fair cost model, right? Simplifying the publishing relationship increasing publishing opportunities within our membership, increasing OA publications within the membership. One of the things that we've seen as we look back and analyzed 20 years of our publishing data, we saw that open was not just an idea, right? That actually we saw in open publications usually got 3 times the citations of closed publications, and we know that by looking at the data, right? That removing barriers for our authors and institutions, this is particularly important because many of the publishing models that have emerged over that space of time over the last 20 years inadvertently created a lot of barriers for authors. And it's now our responsibility to look back on those. I would say I don't think anybody did that intentionally, but they emerged, right, as we put in more and more things. And now we get the opportunity to look back on that and say, we want it to be different, so we need to change. And finally, giving authors greater control of the use and reuse of their scholarship, because sadly, one of the things that has happened in the creation of those barriers is that in the value of research, authors began to lose control of their own research, which doesn't advance science and it doesn't help any of us move. So one of the things that we're doing is then saying, well, these are 6 high-level principles. We need to get specific about how these appear in contracts, how they appear in terms, and things like that. So each one of those, we got specific about the number of elements, right? It's like, what are the elements that compose that value statement? We built what we call the open publishing dial. So it's basically a rubric for being able to measure offers that we're getting. It's a negotiating tool to use at the table to say, how are we doing on offers that are coming in? Where are we seeing some weaknesses? Where do we have to go back and work on another part? This is meant to be a conversation tool, right? Because when we sit down with publishers, what we mean when we're putting values and principles at the center is we're having a different kind of conversation. And this is to give us kind of a tool to be able to look at that and say, how are we doing on that conversation? So as you can perhaps see from this is like, we were very encouraged to see that up in the most elements, these are 5-point scale, right? So it's just as right, those from 1 to 5, that the most number of elements that we were measuring are up under fair cost model and down under author rights and experience. That told us we were really moving in the right direction, right? Those are the 2 high-level places that we really want to be. The way that this comes out, and this is what the dial looks like, and that, it looks like a lot, it's 190 possible points, but we tiered those out into 5 different tiers and say, well, if we're really on the low end of value alignment, that's not what we meant by open publishing. We really need to do better. It's pretty far off. And to move up, we're closer to open publishing. We're in the zone all the way up toward finally moving effectively toward open publishing. And at the top end of the scale there is meaningfully advances the open publishing ideal. Nobody has seen that yet, right? So where we want to be, right, is that's the tier below that. That's our spot where we're working. One of the ways that we formed this was through experience, right? And IOP was actually a foundational element in our strategy. It was one of the very first open publishing agreements we made. And developing this really came out of our experience, working at the table together, being together, saying, what is it that we're making progress, where can we go, and becoming more sophisticated about how we have that conversation. So on this slide, you can see it's like publisher A, B, and C, but those are real scores. We took the publisher names out, right? Because this is a tool, and it's meant to be an assistance, right? And to say, what we should be seeing over the course of a negotiation is that that dial moves higher and higher, right? And that we have a common conversation about how that looks. So this is kind of how we're approaching that values and principles-based assessment within our portfolio. It's not that we stop paying attention to cost. It's not that we stop saving money or paying attention to efficiency and business problem, but just that it becomes one metric among many, and that we get more sophisticated about how we bring these same places we want to be in data-informed process, and all of this comes down to contracts and agreements, of course, and that we're building a structured way to approach that and creating the agreements that really move us all forward.
All right.
Thank you so much, Maurice. And thank you all for joining us today. I'm Miranda Bennett. I'm Director of Shared Collections at California Digital Library, and that's part of the 10-campus University of California system. And what I'm going to talk about is has a lot in common with what you've heard both from Antonia and Maurice. You'll hear some definite resonances. We're going to talk about what we've developed as a way of approaching what we're calling non-commercial topics. You can also think about them as some of these values-related topics. You'll see some examples there on the screen. You'll notice several of them are directly connected to the author experience that Antonia was highlighting. So I want to talk a little bit about the process that we've developed for incorporating these into negotiations. And of course, we are also talking about commercial terms, financial models, those kind of things. Obviously, that's still a key part of all our negotiations as well. But what we're trying to work toward here is a kind of consistent framework so that we're not reinventing things every time we go to the negotiating table, but also something that has some flexibility to it. So we can, from this list, and this is not an exhaustive list, these are illustrative examples, we can pick the ones that might be the highest priority with a particular publisher. There's also an opportunity to fairly easily incorporate if there's a specific issue that's maybe only relevant to that publisher, or if there's an emerging issue that we want to start addressing, we can bring that to the conversation as well. And we can also develop particular asks or actions that we're looking for from a publisher within this framework. I think this is actually particularly well suited to working with society publishers because these are, I think, topics, like I was saying, with the author experience, they're topics that many of these publishers are already thinking about, already prioritizing. There would also be the opportunity to, within this conversation, which starts really with the beginning of a negotiation, to introduce a topic where maybe they see an opportunity, a publisher sees an opportunity for a partnership around a particular non-commercial topic. So I want to talk a little bit about the why and the how. I still haven't quite worked out in presenting this framework what order to do these things in, but the reason we've really started doing this, and we've been doing it for a while, it's just now we're moving into this more structured, consistent way of managing it, is that as any of you who participate in negotiations know, it's during that negotiation window that you have this very intense engagement between a library and a publisher. And you're communicating a lot, you're having a lot of meetings. So this is a moment when it's great to talk about more than just money. It's a way to, when libraries have some leverage, when we're in this intense communication, and it also creates the possibility to take one of these non-commercial issues and actually expand the engagement around that issue across the life of a contract. So you might talk about something like support for funder mandate compliance within the context of the negotiation. You're probably not expecting to, at the end of the negotiation, have everything worked out. But you could document within that agreement, here's where we want to be, here are some milestones we're going to target. And that's part of this, as part of a contract. Then it becomes part of something that both sides are fully committed to. And this is also an opportunity, I think, for both for libraries and for publishers. And again, I think society publishers are especially well suited to this, to really lead change. And you can see that if we've got BTAA and UC, and Rachel will be talking about other libraries, there's a lot of interest in these topics. And those libraries and consortia with the resources and the time and the staffing to really work on these issues can really advance the conversation. So the structure for this is that we have developed a sort of, it's evolving into a template where we're describing our perspective on a particular non-commercial topic, saying what it is that we want to get, where we want to be, where we see an opportunity for the publisher to advance at that issue and align potentially more closely with UC and library values. So that's kind of the initial starting point. In some cases, we're able to develop or put together sub-teams out of our negotiating team. We can bring in subject matter experts on some of these topics. And then the results become part of the publicly available license. All UC licenses are posted publicly, and we remind our publisher partners over and over that that is the intended outcome, and we hope they talk to their general counsel early in the process. So again, I think by having that as something then that publishers can point to as well, to say, here's an example of how we're advancing something that you in the library community care about, we in the scholarly publishing community care about, and that becomes something then that can be replicated as an example. And I have a typo on the slide. I added that. I put that one on there, that bullet on there twice, but it doesn't need to be there. So I also want to talk quickly about a little mini case study about one of these non-commercial topics that has been a real priority for the University of California, California Digital Library for the past, really going on about 2 years now. And this has to do with author rights, and Maurice was alluding to this and talking about how one of the unintended consequences, shall we say, of the move to open access publishing has been, in some cases, authors have given up rights that they want to protect, they should be able to protect. And this happens in particular in cases where they're working on with their license to publish, the agreement between the author and the publisher, and the author says, I would like to have a non-commercial, so an open license, a Creative Commons license, but that has an NC non-commercial or ND non-derivative piece to it. And presumably what they're thinking is, I don't want this commercialized in ways that I'm not comfortable with. But in some cases, they are actually signing away those rights, handing them over in an exclusive way to the publisher. So this has been a big awareness building campaign, which is really important, I think, especially with society publishers who perhaps have some of this language in their license to publish agreements unintentionally. It was perhaps adapted from other versions of these documents, and nobody really thought through. This was something that a lot of us weren't aware of just a year or two ago. So this is something that we're always working with publishers on, and I think there's very strong values alignment with scholarly societies on this topic because, it's their members who are also their authors who care about this particular issue quite a lot. So I think there are so many opportunities for libraries and scholarly publishers to work, or society publishers to work together on these issues, and a couple of kind of very high-level shared values that we can approach the negotiating table with from both sides are, a real interest in learning, and that came out in the video that Antonia shared, and an interest in creating and furthering knowledge and understanding. And if we enter the negotiation with that mindset, I think there's so much space to advance these values that we share. So I'll turn the mic over to Rachel for the next part of our panel. There you are.
All right. I'll try to balance these things. Bear with me as I figure this out. So my name is Rachel Caldwell. I'm head of academic engagement at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. And I'm one of the co-founders of the Library Partnership Rating, which is what I'm going to talk to you about today. So what is LPR, or Library Partnership Rating for journal publishers? It's a rating system. It evaluates journal publishers on how well their practices align with library values. There are 5 library values in the evaluation. Community, which is evidence of community mindedness and how the publisher chooses to work with libraries and others. Access, first for readers, open access or delayed access, and also for authors, equitable writing or publishing access. The third value is rights, copyright, licensing, and other author and reuse rights, related to what Miranda just talked about. Discoverability and access, which is expectations and standards, including metadata. And finally, preservation, both archiving and long-term preservation. Some of these practices can be ascertained from a publisher's website. Others are determined from other data sources. So for example, much of a publisher's discoverability score is based through checking cross-ref participation reports, and then that goes into the rubric. A publisher's community score is determined in a variety of ways, but partially through checking membership organizations such as COPE, the Committee on Publication Ethics, and OWASPA, and also looking at lists that are available from LPR and or the Open Access Directory Wiki at Simmons University. So why did we found the Library Partnership Rating? The LPR rating is designed to sit alongside other metrics. It does not replace any metrics, similar to what Maurice is talking about. We need more metrics. It helps librarians by gathering existing public data in one place. It also helps publishers see what matters to librarians. The rating is also a way to identify publishers who share with libraries similar missions and values, such as many societies and university presses. It is meant to start or continue conversations about where there is already alignment and where there is room for greater alignment. LPR is a project I started with a colleague about 5 years ago. Early on, we formed a Library Partnership Advisory Council to advise us in this work. We've had representatives from libraries, publishers, and related organizations on 2 Library Partnership Advisory Councils so far. We've recently welcomed our 3rd advisory council to start working with us this academic year. Members of our first advisory council recommended a way to reach out to publishers to invite their responses to the rubric scores. The second advisory council gave attention to this as we developed a form that's become a publisher questionnaire. And you can see some of the questions that are here on this slide. The LPR Publisher Questionnaire is a voluntary form that we invite rated publishers to complete. It takes about 30 minutes overall and does not gather private company information. In fact, some of this information could be gleaned by librarians who are doing the rating or scoring during the rubric process, but many of these facts are probably easier for a publisher to supply quickly, so it saves us a little bit of time. Also, much of the information that's supplied in the questionnaire is not intended to be rated or numerically scored. Instead, this information provides a broader picture of a publisher to librarians. LPR can help newer publishers and mid-size and smaller publishers align their practices with library values. A rating is not static. Publishers will be re-rated every 2 or 3 years, and a publisher's score is likely to change as their practices change and as their rubric is updated and changes too. If a publisher rates low in a particular area, the combination of librarian-scored rubric and publisher-completed questionnaire will work together to help librarians understand why that score is low. So for example, we ask in the questionnaire, do you consider yourself a small publisher? If so, that might explain why a publisher's discoverability scores are low. So perhaps they don't have enough staff that are working with Crossref or don't understand the importance of that metadata. This is a great point for conversation between a library and a publisher and vice versa. We really want LPR to be a tool that makes relationships less transactional and instead foster a deeper relationship with better understanding among community members as the foundation. This is particularly the case with societies that publish, university presses, and the like, where values are already in great alignment with libraries. This is a tool that helps libraries and publishers see that alignment for themselves and grow from there.
Stand so you can keep the, yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Burke. I'm the Publications Director. A very long title, but from the American Physiological Society. And since there's a few APSs out there, I thought I'd say who we are. We are the American Physiological Society. We publish 16 journals, 13 self-published, 3 partner-published, a different term of partner, but with our some of our other for-profit publishers and a nonprofit as well. And what Antonia said and what we've all been talking about, we put all of our revenue back into the community that we serve. Really, that's our entire reason to exist. We're a membership society, and that drives all of our decisions, including our publishing decisions. The pictures I have up here talk about some of the programs that we invest in, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but really it's the people that are in those pictures, and that's who we're here to serve. So yes, we need revenue to do that, we need revenue to publish, but those are all the people, and they're real people, real members, real editors that we are serving, and we do it across their entire career portfolio, you know, from the trainees all the way up to the researcher, educator, whatever field that you're in. And so when we talked about we're nonprofit, we are different, how do we let authors know that? Our members are very active and very engaged, and they certainly understand that, but we have about 6,000 members and 80,000 authors. So how do we transform that message to these authors so they can understand? So we launched a Publish with Purpose in 2019, which was really, the reason you publish with us is because you support your scientific community without even knowing it. A few other reasons, of course. You publish with us because you want to get your paper list read, and you want everybody to cite your information. You want your information to be, qualified, and we go through a extreme review system, which we give a lot of citations. We're #1 ranking in physiology, and we have about over a third of our physiology citations all come from our organization. And we do it for possibilities, right? Because we're a nonprofit, we're taking that revenue and we're going and doing a lot of events, a lot of different customized meetings for all of our members and the research community. And you can collaborate on new projects by meeting each other. You can do new career paths by engaging in this community. We launched a new American Physiology Summit. We used to be part of experimental biology, but we launched our own meeting. It's been to raving success. I do say so. And really what we do as nonprofits, a lot of people in the author community don't know, but we're really advocating on your behalf and on behalf of the science. So we're looking at more federal research funding, proper animal research. We also are looking for opportunities for underrepresented groups. So that's a new article cover, a new journal cover that we have. It's for our Physiologist magazine, which is a membership-based program, but it's all women in science, and those are, again, real people, obviously you can see. But they're leaders at the APS, but they also are published with us, and they're researchers, and they're active in their community. So just like the people that are reviewing the content, they're practicing scientists, they're active researchers, and they're part of our editorial boards, which are now global and esteemed editorial boards. But these women in science, we're doing a women's health initiative, and that we've merged. Again, it's saying that we're a nonprofit society that's a publisher, and making sure that the whole entire community knows that connection. So we're doing women in research, and we're doing things at the publishing partner program, and we're also combining that with what the society does, because we're one and the same. So after we talked to all the authors, we got a lot of feedback, and from our editorial boards really driving us to change our business model. And it's much more exciting than this one slide, but we will be doing a launch in 2025 of 10 of our primary research journals. There's a lot of complexity, even though it is simple for librarians, just renew. That's it. But there are some nuances, so we're giving an OA guarantee. So when we talk about this fair, some of the rubric and the things that you've mentioned, like we do want to make sure that we are sustainable, but we also want to make our content open so it's more accessible. And we're trying to connect all these communities. The funders are making these requirements, and we don't know how much they're talking to the authors and how they're not talking to the libraries. Maybe they're having a few groups, but really, how do we communicate that to all parties? And this is our attempt at that in 2025. And the whole entire purpose is to champion the discipline. That's our raison d'etre. So when we did this, we were like, okay, we think we know what we're doing. And then I talked to some librarians and they said, no, you don't. So, so I reached out to them and I said, listen, I really need, and again, harnessing on those P's, physiology, partnering with purpose. And so we established a library advisory board. I see Miranda and Robin here, thank you, who are members. And really, they just looked at what we were trying to communicate to the market and said, okay, you're missing this. What is this? You're not putting this there. We put some really good feedback loops on our website to say, what are we missing here? And my digital person that's not here wants to kill me because every time I get a directive from a librarian, I'm like, change it. She's like, can you just collect them? And then we can do all at once. But really, we did an intense interview with a lot of our librarians to go over some of the materials and really give us some feedback, which they're not shy at doing. And it's all in line with everything that we're talking about here. They said, well, what about, we're measuring things differently. Why aren't you advocating that more or promoting it more? So our message is always going to be iterative, and we're always going to be changing that to make sure it's more understandable. This is why we're able to stand up our first transparency report, which is exactly why Tony and I are here to talk about all the money and revenue that we make, we put back into the society to promote the science. So we've got that publicly. I've got a quote here from a Columbian librarian about Subscribe to Open, but really, we're just being driven by a lot of different stakeholders in this community, and we want to get it right. This is this QR code. You can get all of our contact here on this webpage that Antonia's team made for us. So go for that. But we're also going to open it up for questions, and I don't want anyone to be shy because then it takes the pressure off us. Thanks so much. But I mean, I'm going to. You know what, I'm just going to start because they know me, I'm pretty talkative. But Maurice, when you were talking, one of the things I say to a lot of my staff is facts over feelings. And so I really like that you have some, but is this an internal document only? Is it only for the Big Ten negotiation? You're not putting this out into the community, or how is that?
Oh, sure. The best way to characterize this is like in development. So we started it as an internal tool because we were just trying to improve our own understanding of what we were looking at and things like that. However, as we were building it, we realized, people who find this interesting, it could be a handy tool. So one of the hypotheses we have, and it's a hypothesis because nobody's tried it, right, is that the 6 high-level principles there are fairly durable across different types of organizations and things like that. It was actually, I had thought while we were developing it, within the U.S., right, this was pretty good. I was at the OA 2020 workshop in Munich earlier this summer, and lead negotiators from all over the world, we got together, sat down, and did an exercise where we were looking at values alignment, in each portfolio, and what people were looking to put in their contract. And actually, I was quite taken aback to see that there's broad values alignment all across the spectrum. So we think those are fairly durable at the high level. The elements that are underneath, of course, are going to change depending on like local culture, politics, financial capabilities, priorities, things like that. So the way that we built it is as a spreadsheet, right? And it's just plugging in values that auto-calculate and things like that. We have put that up as well as a little companion piece. We haven't publicized it or anything like that, but we do have it available, and so that people can copy it, create their own version of the template, redo the values and things like that. So that we haven't necessarily rolled it out in that way because we were still working on it, we're sure. But I think we absolutely we keep kind of tinkering it with it, right? And seeing it as oh wow, here's an interesting way to apply it and different things like that. So yeah, very much.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoy people being iterative, as I noted before. It's it's a work in progress, but yours is publicly available and everything's online, and I know that the link there goes to it. And you're promoting it actively among the communities.
Yeah, we've just started really, but yes.
Yeah. See? You're not so far behind. And then Miranda, you do a lot of public outreach on your website alone, and even though you remind us publishers, we do forget, so I appreciate the reminder. But what other things do you have, publicly available? Your rubric is right, I know it's online, and you can see all the elements that exist. What about you, Miranda? What others besides the contracts?
Yeah, I mean, I think for the purposes of what I was talking about, it's the publicly available contracts. Scroll all the way to the end of the PDF because commitments related to non-commercial terms are often being captured in an exhibit or a schedule or an appendix, one of those pieces that comes toward the end. So I think it's really interesting thinking about the work that Maurice and Rachel were describing. I could see these things really coming together, that you have a kind of, what we're talking about is really about crafting your negotiation strategy, but you could take pieces of that and work within a rubric. or you could take parts of your rubric and or parts of the partnership rating and move those into a negotiating strategy structure. So I think there's a lot of really interesting possibilities for cross-pollination, which definitely speaks to like make these things as public as we can.
Yeah, I mean, I think you had said they're meant to be on top, so it's like stackable metrics and pick and choose, right? I mean, really, what's best for your institution? So we've got, you've got a group of librarians, 2 consortia. I mean, I'll go to us, but I don't want to make you feel left out.
I just wanted to add and build on what Miranda was saying, because I'm not in the detail of the negotiations and the appendices that you were talking about, but presumably this is an opportunity to work more closely in partnership with publishers to solve some of the joint issues that we face.
Absolutely.
So how do we get more people sharing their data? How do we get people taking research integrity more seriously?
Right.
And these are the things that we can work on together that go beyond just, here's our content, this is how much you pay, let's collaborate together. Is that the sort of thing that you were...
Absolutely, yeah. And so you could even see, for example, the data that you want to feed into your rubric, you could write into your contract that you expect to receive that data on a particular schedule or something like that. So yeah, or, some sort of commitment to improving something about research integrity. So, there are varying degrees of how challenging it is to define specific measurable outcomes around some of these non-commercial topics. And I think that's why this idea of, assigning numbers or ratings or things like that, I can see we're sort of coming at the same challenge from multiple directions.
Yeah, and we talked about author experience. Oh, do you have questions? Yes. All right, we'll take them. As you're walking over there, I'll get it. We talked about author experience, and for us, it's clear. We have authors, we're connected to them on a daily basis because of our publishing elements. But for you all, I mean, that's the community you serve. I mean, are you all really getting a lot of feedback, like, where can I publish? What's the most common question you get from authors trying to publish? Where do I get the free publishing?
That's where do I get the money to publish this open access? Yeah,
I'll answer that for you. I assumed that, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I don't think that we're seeing a lot of questions on the values yet, but I think that as faculty members are continuing to see the impact on their own budgets, there are, I think, increasing questions about why are we doing this? Where does this money go? I think that's a big question, and I think that's where societies have an edge because they can say where it's going and it's going to a good place. So I think we're in early days of faculty maybe thinking, but the other thing is societies, as you said, are made up of faculty and researchers. And so I think we're in early days, but I think that faculty are starting to have these questions because if they're publishing multiple times a year and almost all journals now have the APC or many do, they want to know not just the impact factor, but also what's happening with their own budgets and what's the value. I think we're in this tension phase of impact factor versus these bigger questions, and we'll see where that goes.
Okay.
Hi, good afternoon. Nicola Hill with the American Association for Cancer Research. As a small niche publisher, we are very interested in engaging with libraries, but we don't know how to start. What you've mentioned today is very interesting. So how would we go about sort of engaging in these initiatives? Do you have a prioritized list of publishers with whom you're interested in having these discussions, or should we sort of take the first step?
So both, right? I think, so for BTA, the way it looks for us is that we have a licensing portfolio that was built like most consortial licensing pools in the US. It was built by opportunity and contract and where can we get value and things like that. That spans a really broad range from very small agreements that cover a couple members for, sometimes thousands of dollars, all the way up to contracts that are, $50 $15, $18 million. So our strategy is to convert the dollars that are in our portfolio to be centered in open publishing. So we have a strategy for how we convert what has been a traditional licensing pool to open publishing. So in that sense, you could call that a prioritized list. We're like converting our portfolio. However, I will say that our agreement with IOP came about because IOP kind of approached us and said, hey, I think we could do something really interesting here. And that's where I say it was like this whole model is a learning model, and to say where have we had successes and let's stand on that and build further in, right? So I think they can happen both ways. The more that we put out a clearly articulated and structured set of what those values are, of what we're looking for and things like that, I think it becomes easier and easier for various publishers to look at that and say, hey, yeah, I think we're there. Let's talk. I think we could move each other forward, and things like that. So for us, it really kind of, I think, happens both ways.
Yeah, I would say it's similar with the University of California. I think there was several things that were looked at to prioritize publishers. A big one, of course, is the publishing volume by UC authors, because an important metric for us is the percentage of articles published by UC authors that are covered, that would be eligible for open access support through one of our agreements. We've worked through a lot of the ones very high on that list. So we're, a lot of the remaining publishers that would kick us up a couple percentage points maybe in that particular measure. But there are also considerations like, is it a publisher who seems ready and willing to work with us on not only on the commercial terms or the financial terms, but also on these values aligned non-commercial topics.
Yeah, and I'll just say, don't be shy. Honestly, there hasn't been a librarian that I haven't gone to and said, I'd like to ask you some questions, and we are very small, and consider, we've talked about this, Nicola, but really, it's where the opportunity is. One of our first transformative agreements came with, Robin Simmons and her team, and Curtis Brundy was like, no, not that. Nice try, keep going. But it was really a partnership that we went about it, and then, the same thing for this. But I really say that, we're part of Society Publishers Coalition, which is all nonprofit societies, and that's all we talk about is how do we get a seat at the table? And I say the same thing, grab one. Really, everybody's very open and collaborative in this community, which we're very lucky to have, so.
I'll just do a quick plug too on our website for the library partnership rating. There's a contact us, and then just put your information in and you'll be added to the list. I'll mention Robin and I are a small team of 2 working on this. So we have to select, but we'd love to have your interest in recorded.